Hey traders, another recap here of my ES futures trading for Friday, June the 17th. Very happy with the result today, 8.75 points on 5 trades. That was actually my best result of the week and kind of makes up for yesterday where I made a few points, but felt like I kind of underperformed a little bit compared to usual, and this one was very good and ended up the week with about 19 points, I think, and that's an excellent result overall. Definitely happy with it, but especially this was only for 1 hour of trading. Basically, I started a little bit late today, 10:30, traded till 11:30, and so to be able to pull out 8.75 points in just an hour is really great. And it was one that actually could have been a little bit better. Probably should have been a little bit better here if I hadn't taken a loss a little bit later. But just taking a look at the trades, we started off here. We were kind of in a little bit of a range, testing between a couple areas. We had a pretty clear zone here that had reacted basically right around this 2062. That's why I had that line in there, because it's a wider zone, but some pretty clear reactions right at that level, and it had broken through. And so by the time I started, we had already kind of run away with it. Getting pretty extended. Wouldn't have minded kind of trading in here with a nice smooth pullback, but once things test that second time, I'm a little bit more concerned that it could come back a little bit deeper, and so being fairly cautious there. Also, not really too much in here to react, and so if I'm going to trade after things get really extended like this after a very strong vertical move, I want to trade in an area where I know that sellers can come back in my favor, where I can expect to see some supply enter the market and push things back down. Without that, a deeper retracement is very possible. If you use Fibonacci retracements, that sort of thing, getting back to 50% of the move is certainly a possibility. And that's basically what we saw here. Came back into that level and had what I call a deep level pullback in here, in line with what was, again, some really strong selling. Pretty rare you're not going to at least see an attempt at some continuation off of that strong of a move. So this was a pretty good level to find it, and I didn't want to trade it blindly, especially because I had a bit of momentum coming in here. So I don't want to trade these levels just blind and just kind of hoping that things are going to hold. I want, in these sort of cases, when I'm going against these short-term flows, want to make sure that things are holding a little bit first. And so was holding, came back to test again, and I got a nice short here. Almost exited in here for a smaller profit, just because when it started to hold in here, it had a decent chance of coming back to test again, and before maybe pushing back down. But this was such a strong move that I gave it a chance. Ended up getting a push down into that prior low and just took the profit there. Could have had an extra point, and 5 points is basically the max I aim for. But really happy with that result in here, and this often will have a little bit of a reaction on that test back in here, basically into a potential double bottom. So didn't mind taking the profit off the table, since that is a very high percentage profit there compared to looking just for that extra few ticks. As we came back, took a trade in here, which was definitely a little bit riskier, because even though we were pushing into some fresh lows here, this zone, if we go back, this was actually that one that I traded yesterday. That flip right around that 2056 that I took a long on, got a few points on. So that same area could be reactive, but again, we were just pushing down so aggressively here that I was willing to give it a try. We didn't have quite as clear of a reaction already on a pullback like we had back in here, so a little bit safer to trade. And this one I wasn't looking for much. I even would have been happy with a point and a half or so if it started to really struggle in here, but we got down to that prior low, just took that profit off the table, and then we started to kind of get a little bit tighter price action here. And in this case, I at least knew that I had a pretty good chance that I would test down into this 56. So if price struggled in here and failed to push lower, I would either be able to take a little bit of profit on the table, or at least be able to bring my risk right in. Once you get into a situation like this, where we're kind of right in that zone, you don't really have that wiggle room anymore, that management room. So unless I've got a little bit of room to manage my trade, I don't want to get into something really aggressive. And once you're right within these zones that could be reactive, you have to be more cautious. And that's just part of our STA trading approach, our methodology of just avoiding those sort of situations. This short here is kind of a non-STA trade in terms of taking it a little bit higher here as a more conservative trend line. sort of a trade, but again, in line with these flows, we kept selling off. So because I had a couple pretty good trades, I was willing to give this another chance, just basically trading off the resistance slash trend line here. But as you can see, similar to this one, wanted to make sure that things were holding a bit first. So less of a momentum-based trade, more of a technical trade. And this was a very technical market on this day and had a number of good reactions, based off those technical factors. So I was being a little bit more aggressive there. Most STA traders probably wouldn't have traded that one. But from there, we had the false breakdown in here, which looked fairly likely after seeing things coming back in here and getting some slowdown, and then basically shooting back after getting a flattened battle line in here. So didn't want to try to force anything in there and just kind of waited for things to resolve. Having those trap traders there often does lead to directional moves in the opposite direction. We talked about that yesterday. When you get those people who are short in here, they get kind of trapped. They start to panic when things start to break structurally in the other direction. And the ones who are short now have to go long, and it can accelerate things. So gotten a long here after things broke into a fresh high with some momentum, took it up for a couple points back into this key zone, and then took another long here, which I actually got taken out on the edge. And that was a little bit unfortunate. That's actually 2 days in a row again that we're seeing these cycles repeat, but had the basically exact same type of trade yesterday that came back right to that edge, took me out. And if I'm using a bigger stop, yeah, I could have been safe here, but this could have come down a few more ticks before pushing up. So I'm not too worried about that. It does sometimes happen. If you want to keep tight stops, keep your risk really limited. Sometimes you might get taken out on the edge of them, but that's sort of a price I'm willing to pay in order to have a very strong reward to risk ratio. So in hindsight, probably should have been a bit more conservative on this because of the area that was reacting and the kind of minimal momentum as it was pushing up, but not too worried about it. It does happen sometimes. So still just fine with that result, and the overall result's great. The overall weekly result I was quite happy with, given that we had a couple more difficult days in there. So hopefully you guys had a really good trading day as well, maybe even better than me if you traded a little bit longer than I did. But hope you had a good one, like I said, and enjoy your weekend. I'll see you in the next recap.